Jaron, this morning's testimony has really centered around where Sade Robinson's remains were found days after she went missing near 31st and Galena. This is a wooded area where her severed foot, was found, along with small pieces of bone and other flesh.
Surveillance footage captures a young woman climbing into her car after a date. She looks ordinary, smiling, tired, hopeful, and then she drives off into the night. By morning, firefighters find her Honda Civic burning. By the next day, a severed human leg washes up on a nearby beach. What began as a simple first date on April 1st, 2024 becomes a horror that shatters a family and shakes a city. 19-year-old Sade Robinson, a college student and part-time worker, vanished that night. Her friends and family were left with questions. Detectives were left with pieces of a puzzle. Chapter 5 of the grim chapters traces those pieces, the cameras, the phone pings, the witnesses, and asks how a normal evening ended in such a brutal loss. We will follow every lead, every clue, step by step, to truth. Sade Robinson was born May 10, 2004 in Vicksburg, Mississippi. When she was about a year old, her family moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and she grew up there with her mother, Sheena Scarborough, and her grandparents. Her father, Carlos Robinson, lived in Florida, and Sade spent time with him during parts of her childhood. She was curious and active: soccer, Girl Scouts, ballroom dancing, rapping, and at one point she thought about joining the Air Force. After living with her father for a few years, she returned to Milwaukee for high school and excelled, graduating a semester early in December 2021. She enrolled at Milwaukee Area Technical College to study criminal justice. To support herself, she worked at Pizza Shuttle, a local pizza place she had started at in her teens. Friends describe her laugh as contagious and her drive as steady. Those who loved her remember a young woman with goals and a future that was cut far too short. Around 4:15 p.m., Sade sent a short, ordinary text to a man named Maxwell Anderson, asking where they would meet. What followed looks like a normal back and forth. He suggested meeting downtown, then changed the plan to a place called the Twisted Fisherman. He told her he needed to pick up a W-2 form from when he used to work there. She said she loved seafood and agreed. He messaged he was getting in the shower and might be a little late, maybe 5:15. And they set a meeting around 5 p.m. to 5:20 p.m. We do not know exactly how they met. Some reports say a dating app. Others say they may have met at a bar Maxwell had worked at. What is clear from witnesses, Maxwell arrived at the Twisted Fisherman shortly after 5. Sade walked in and sat beside him at the bar. They ordered food and drinks and talked like any two people on a first date. Staff later told police Maxwell said he was there to pick up his W-2 form and that he was meeting a girl for a first date. To everyone looking on, the night began as a normal evening. Small talk, a few laughs, the slow ease of two people getting to know one another. After about an hour at the Twisted Fisherman, they paid the bill and left the restaurant together. Maxwell did not appear to have driven his own vehicle there, and the way both of them stepped into Sade's car made it seem like the evening would continue on a friendly note. No one who watched that moment thought danger was near. No one who watched that night could have guessed it would be the last time Sade would be seen alive by people who loved her. The ordinary details, the timestamps, the W-2 story, the way they left together, would later become part of the chain of evidence detectives used to follow her last known movements. A little later, surveillance shows them pulling into Duke's on Water parking lot at about 6:30 p.m. Inside the bar, cameras catch them sitting at a table, talking and drinking. The footage is quiet and ordinary. Two people leaning in, trading stories, sipping drinks. They stay for hours. Time moves the way it always does in bars. Slowly, with music and background chatter. A few rounds of drinks, the kind of easy talk that starts to feel personal. Patrons and staff later said they saw nothing alarming. The pair looked like any other customers. They laughed and ordered more drinks. People who saw them remember the conversation as casual, Nothing that would make anyone step in. Hours passed. The bar emptied bit by bit as the night went on. The cameras kept rolling, and the tape would later show timestamps that matter. Arrival, orders, faces lit by the neon, the soft clink of glass. Then, shortly after 9 p.m., footage shows Sade and Maxwell standing, moving toward the exit and getting into Sade's car together. That scene, caught on camera, becomes a hinge in the whole story. For detectives and family alike, it is the last clear, confirmed image of Sade alive that night. After that frame, the public record becomes quieter. People who knew her waited for a text, a call, anything. None came. The ordinary night of two strangers at a bar had ended in a way no one expected. A car driving out into the dark, and a young woman's life that would not return to the morning she planned for. In the small hours after the night, the first clear alarm came not from a neighbor but from fire dispatch. At around 7:32 a.m. on April 2nd, the Milwaukee Fire Department answered a call for a car fully engulfed in flames. When crews reached the scene, they found a 2020 Honda Civic ablaze. At that moment, nobody at the scene knew who owned the car. It was just a burned vehicle on the side of the road, until later when registration checks tied that same car to Sade Robinson. Meanwhile, Sade's absence began to register with the people who relied on her. She didn't show up for her shift at the pizza place where she'd worked for years. Calls and texts went unanswered. Her silence felt wrong to family and friends because she was the sort of person who kept people posted. A text, a quick call, anything. By evening, when worries hadn't eased, a close friend went to the police station and filed a missing person report. That same day, something far worse appeared on a nearby beach. A walker found a severed human leg at Warmont Park. The county medical examiner later identified that the limb belonged to a black female of about 5 feet tall. Two discoveries, the burned vehicle and the human remain, suddenly changed the way police handled what had started as a disappearance. The missing person case became a homicide investigation. Detectives moved from asking who might have left town to asking where a young woman's life had been violently taken apart. The day that began with a fire call closed on a grim, urgent search for answers. When physical evidence raised the alarm, investigators turned to the small digital traces people leave behind. Phone records and location data can't tell intention, but they do show movement. Detectives requested Sade's cellular records and learned that her last texts went to a number tied in police files to a man named Maxwell Anderson. That led them to dig deeper into location pings and shared tracking apps. A friend later checked a Life 360 group and saw Sade's phone last reported at the park at roughly 4:33 a.m. on April 2nd. The app showed the phone's battery dying at that last ping. Tracking the phone's path more broadly, investigators saw it move near a residence and then sit in that area for several hours before moving again. Those pings gave detectives a map of where the phone was during critical hours, a rough but powerful outline of movement that matched other leads. Camera footage filled in the gaps. A store's surveillance showed 3 people near a vacant lot, 2 together, and a third carrying a tan backpack who crossed the street. A witness in a blue jacket shouted for help, later reporting they'd seen a man exit a Civic, set it on fire, and walked away. Investigators traced the person with the tan backpack as he walked west, later catching him on a city transit bus. That bus footage captured his face, and other nearby cameras recorded a hoodie and posture that matched images from later searches. Piece by piece, pings, app data, store and bus cameras, the digital trail tied scenes together. In a city full of noise and trash, modern tech gave detectives a way to follow the final fractured path of a phone and the people who carried it. When police started finding body parts, the investigation shifted into the hands of science. Everything collected was logged into evidence and taken to the medical examiner's office. What they saw was chilling. A leg, a foot, and later a piece of bone still holding on to soft tissue. These weren't random bones tossed aside, and they all carried signs of belonging to the same person. One detail stood out above all: nail polish. Bright polish on the toes matched across the different remains, tying them together. Forensic specialists then compared bone structure and tissue, separating human pieces from animal bones and trash dumped in the same ravine. It was slow, methodical work. But each test and each confirmation told the same story. These remains came from one victim. The fragments, scattered and burned, now formed a tragic picture. A young woman's life cut short and hidden in pieces. On April 4th, the search for answers led police to one man, Maxwell Anderson. Officers pulled him over and arrested him. Then, with a warrant, they turned their focus to his home. What they found inside made every suspicion even darker. In the bedroom, officers spotted blood on the sheets. On a wall near the basement steps, more bloodstains. It wasn't just a trace. It was enough to raise alarm that something violent had happened there. The garage told another story. Investigators found several gasoline containers, the same type of fuel used in the burning of Sade's car. Down in the basement, the scene was even more unsettling. A sanitary sink was covered with plastic sheeting and nearby tools, including saws. To detectives, it looked less like an accident and more like a place someone had prepared for something gruesome. Other details came out later in reports: a mirror, clothing, and even an ID said to belong to another woman. Some of these claims were questioned in court, but the blood, gasoline, and cutting tools were undeniable. Police believed they had uncovered the space where the crime had played out. And for investigators, this was the moment the case against Anderson turned from possibility into a horrifying reality. As detectives dug deeper, whispers began to surface. A jailhouse informant came forward, claiming Anderson had talked about Sade and hinted there might be other victims. Nothing was proven, but the thought that this may not have been his first time added a chilling layer to the case. The search of his house added to that unease. Alongside the blood, gasoline, and tools, officers cataloged strange items: a woman's ID card belonging to someone else, a mirror propped in the basement, in a way that made investigators wonder if it had been used for something more than decoration. Clothing that didn't appear to belong to Anderson. Each detail pushed the picture of a man hiding a disturbing double life. Prosecutors would later say the basement looked like a space designed for dark purposes, carefully prepared, almost staged. While defense lawyers pushed back, calling some of it ordinary items taken out of context, the collection still weighed heavily in the minds of investigators and the public. Whether or not there were other victims has never been confirmed. But the items pulled from Anderson's home left behind a haunting question. Was this just the tip of something larger, or the isolated work of one man on one terrifying night? With evidence in hand, prosecutors moved quickly. Maxwell Anderson was charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson of property. These were not small accusations. They carried the weight of life behind bars. The courtroom became the new stage for this tragedy. Family and friends of Sade sat quietly, listening as prosecutors laid out the timeline: the date, the fire, the remains, the blood, the basement. Piece by piece, they told the jury how it all connected back to Anderson. The defense tried to poke holes, questioning the informant's credibility, downplaying the household items, and pushing back on how clear the forensic ties really were. But the weight of the case kept building. Jurors saw the burned car. They heard about the nail polish and the careful work of the medical examiner. They learned about the tools and the blood. And above all, they felt the heartbreak of Sade's life ending so suddenly. When the verdict came, it was guilty. The judge handed down a life sentence without parole, ensuring Anderson would never walk free again. For Sade's family, the justice brought no true comfort. Nothing could bring her back. But the conviction meant her story would be told, her name remembered, and her killer would never again hurt another innocent life. The trial was not the end. It was only another chapter in their grief. Friends remembered her laughter, her love for food, her drive to succeed. The community, shaken by the horror, came together in vigils and memorials, holding her name close. But as headlines spread, many felt her humanity was being reduced to sound bites, a victim in a shocking case. Behind every headline was a real person, a daughter, a friend, a co-worker. The danger of sensational coverage is that it can strip away that truth. Yet those who loved her fought back against that noise. making sure Sade was remembered for the life she lived, not only for the way it was taken. Even with Maxwell Anderson convicted, questions remain. Was Sade truly his only victim? Did the strange items in his home point to other dark stories never uncovered? Why did he choose her that night? And what exactly unfolded in the hours after they left the restaurant? The case answered enough for a conviction, but left shadows that may never be explained. For the family, those unknowns sting the most, because they will always wonder what more could have been discovered, and whether pieces of Sade's final hours are still hidden in silence. Thank you for watching this chapter to the end. Please share your thoughts about this tragic story in the comments below. For more true crime stories, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. Stay safe, and we will see you in the next chapter.